From Fox 8 Sports, this is the Overtime Podcast.
From the Fox 8 studios in New Orleans, this is the Fox 8 Overtime Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Fazende, riding shotgun as he does each and every podcast. This is Andre Johnson.
Junior.
Do not forget the Junior is very important to remember the JR at the end of the name. Before we get into today's content, be sure to like, share, rate, review if you are watching us on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button. Get the bell notification for when we drop that fire content. Last week and the week prior, it's been a big week for us on YouTube.
Yeah.
So we certainly appreciate that. Fire content's coming down, and y'all are consuming it, so we like that a lot. It is Monday. I got a couple days off, feeling a little bit better, but I don't know if you can tell. I got a little bit of a throat issue going on right now, a little sore throat, but battling through it. That's the name of the game. When you power through for 2 weeks, like we did between Super Bowl week and obviously the week of the Saints hiring their new head coach. But all in all, I feel pretty good on this Monday. How was your weekend?
It was good. No off time for me because the NOLA Gold were playing their season opener and winning it on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network. So I was there. That was fun. But my big break is coming this weekend. Big WWE guy right here, WWE SmackDown, coming to the Smoothie King Center, and I will be there. So that's what I'm looking forward to.
All right. Well, I'm happy you're happy about that because that sounds like going to be a good time. As for me, we are back in the saddle on this Monday. It was kind of a quiet weekend for sports in general when you really think about it.
A lot of NBA All-Star stuff.
I don't know what you would even call that. I didn't watch much of it. And
didn't
apparently I didn't miss anything. But college baseball opened up, so that was certainly good for the LSU Tigers as well. So all in all, it's good to be back on this Monday. And today we're going to get back into the Kellen Moore situation because there's so many ways you can look at it. There's so many big decisions coming up. He's got to fill out a staff. He's got to make some big-time decisions when it comes to certain players on his roster, certain mainstays, guys that people love around here, absolutely love around here. Those decisions are coming quite soon. But there was one section of the discussion that it didn't necessarily bother me, but it popped up, during his press conference, and I felt like that was a good spot to go today because we're not quite there yet on the coordinator hires. We're not quite there yet on filling out the coaching staff. Still got a little ways to go when it comes to certain decisions about certain players. But so I felt like this was a good time to get this taken. It was one little section of the debate that I think it's important to address, and that is a new Saints head coach and the comparisons to an older or former Saints head coach. That's why we wanted to go with the big picture today.
Yeah, it's almost human nature when you get somebody new in a position to compare him to some of the people who held that position before. And in this case, Kellen Moore is starting to draw a few comparisons to Sean Payton, the greatest Saints head coach of all time. And now, Sean, you covered Sean Payton here in New Orleans for about a decade. You've been around Kellen Moore for about 10 days. So, have you sensed anything that's comparable really between Kellen Moore and Sean Payton?
All right, let's get into it. All right. It was brought up a couple of times. I think there was one, maybe two questions about it in the press conference. And just in general, just people asking, just normal chatter. Talked about it on the final play. Try to get my point across. I'm going to do it now because we got a little bit more room to breathe on this podcast. In fact, I was even, in the little kind of waiting before the Kellen Moore press conference started, a lot of us were doing our live shots. WWL Radio was in there. Bobby was even talking, and he even brought up Sean Payton during his broadcast while we were waiting for that press conference to start. It was almost like another one of those comparisons to Sean Payton. Well, Sean would have did this. Sean Payton would have did that. Sean Payton he's 3 coaches ago. Okay, 3 coaches ago. If you put in Kellen Moore, Darren Rizzi, Dennis Allen. Sean Payton is 3 coaches ago. That's one thing. But Kellen Moore is not, let me repeat, is not Sean Payton. Payton was a young offensive mind and offensive staffer when he got the job. Kellen Moore is obviously the same, a young offensive bright mind when he got the job. But that is where the comparisons come to an absolutely hardest, most screeching halt you could possibly imagine. They are absolutely nothing. Repeat, nothing alike. First up, there's the personality. Look, SP was all bravado. All bravado, trash talking. I got the biggest you-know-what in the room, and I'm going to show you at any time or any chance I can. Almost to a fault because he kind of believed that aggression and alpha is just more often than not you're going to be successful, and it's hard to argue with the result. That's just who he was. And let's be honest. You know, Payton was the habitual line stepper when it comes to bending the rules, what he could and could not get away with. There was a lot of times he was in trouble for stuff or his name popped up around controversies that shouldn't have, that could have very easily been avoided, but that was his personality. And you have that kind of personality, it's going to bleed into other sections of the operation. Plus, and this is really a huge one, and I think this has really taken it some time. While it felt good at first, it's taken some time for the organization to really come to grips with this, just how much he wanted to control every last aspect of everything that went on inside that organization for the duration of the time he was here. Down to the, like, when they would do the certain games where they put towels on the seats, down to like the type of towel they would put on the seats. I mean, that's how much of a control freak. That's how much of a I have to be involved in everything SP Sean Payton was. And I won't go into too much detail of this because this is a little bit out of bounds, so I'll just keep it vague but in bounds. His personal life was adventurous. Let's just put it that way. It was adventurous when he was off the field and in the city of New Orleans. Kellen Moore, personality, not like that. Very mild-mannered, but certainly not like a deaf mute, afraid of people, timid type person. But he's definitely not he's not like that in any way, shape, or form. It doesn't feel like this could change when he gets sort of entrenched in what he wants to do. It doesn't feel like Kellen Moore is going to care about the type of paint inside the dome, that type of stuff, like the trivial stuff that really has nothing to do with what his actual job is supposedly going to be. Secondly, Sean Payton and Kellen Moore's path to becoming a head football coach are completely different in the NFL. Payton started coaching in his early 20s and worked his way up the food chain from college to pro to position coach to coordinator to fired, to back to coordinator, almost fired, and then obviously getting the job at the Saints. Moore had we've talked about it many times, he's had a decorated collegiate career. Played for a while in the league as an NFL backup. Payton was an 87 spare Bears type player in the 87 strike, but that was the only real work he got into the NFL as a player. But Kellen Moore spent, 6-7 seasons as a backup, then spent 1 year as a position coach before 6 straight seasons as an offensive coordinator. That's the jump right there. It's the 1 year position coach to 6 straight a coordinator. That's a huge, huge jump, and obviously becoming a head coach. His rise to the top, frankly, was much faster than Sean Payton's. And lastly, I don't know. I mean, I know the type of offense Payton ran, obviously, when he was with Breeze, but I don't know what kind of offense Kellen Moore is going to run in terms of what stylistically does he want. Does he want the stretch boot? Does he want the RPO? Does he want the West Coast, rhythm passing type game? I don't know. He's ran all three. So that's really the nuts and bolts of the actual person or people being completely different. That's the nuts and bolts. But to me, this goes deeper than just the actual are they alike. This is more of should they compare. The truth is, it is in everyone's best interest, from the team, the media, the city, the fan base, that this is not framed as Sean Payton 2.0. That would be going back to what I believe was a very fatal, critical error in judgment the organization made a few years ago when he left. And I know there are probably a lot of you listening right now that probably think, I don't care about all the other stuff, all the stuff you mentioned, and you shouldn't. You're a fan. You're there to watch a game. I want another Sean Payton. Look at what he did here. I get that. I understand nostalgia. I can get very nostalgic. The older you get more nostalgic. It's just that simple. But sometimes if you're too nostalgic, you can get caught in living in the past. And doesn't it feel like, big picture, when you really watch what's happened over the last 4 years, that's been an issue for this organization. A little bit of living in the past, holding on to an era that it's well past the time that it was over. So let me just say, it's not about returning to the glory days of Sean Payton. It's about creating new ones with Kellen Moore. It's not about the next Sean Payton. It's about embracing the new, fresh Kellen Moore era. Now, let me be fair, completely fair. because we have taken our shots at the organization. But in this regard, at least from what I have gotten, A, from the coaching search, and B, from the press conference, I truly believe the Saints franchise finally understands this. They finally understand that we're making a clean break from that era. And in many ways, they said as much by hiring Kellen Moore. The decision to go with Moore is a full, entire break from the Payton way. Not going back to the Payton way, because you can get in a lot of trouble doing that kind of stuff if you're an organization just chasing ghosts. That era is done, and the Saints, to me, at least right now, understand this. That's a good thing. You may recall, I don't know if you had officially taken over for Sill at this point, but there was a time on this very podcast after the 2022 regular season where I said the ghost of Sean Payton still haunt this organization because he hovers over them, but he's not there. And it's this weird push-pull where he's kind of around, but he has nothing to do with the organization, but everybody keeps comparing. And after that season, I made a deliberate effort. I referred to him multiple times as the former Saints head coach. That was not a diss. That was by design because I felt like, and I did that for the entire 2023 season, I felt like we in the media were going way too strong with the comparisons of what they were currently in to compare and comparing that to what they previously were. And I felt like that energy was just weird. They tried to break free in 2023. Obviously, a little bit of success, but then it came crashing down in 2024. I don't know if I'll go back to that rule. I don't know if I'm going to have to because it feels like we're getting farther and farther away from that. But I probably will if I feel like the comparisons are starting to pick up again because I don't want it. I don't want it. The Payton era was fantastic. This is a new era. The Dennis Allen era was not fantastic. This is a new era. What happened from 06 to 2021 was one thing. What's going to happen from 2025 and beyond is something totally different. Give Kellen Moore the same sort of respect. Now, hopefully the next comparison we can make is Moore being the first coach since Sean Payton to get the Saints back to the Super Bowl. That's the next time I want to compare Kellen Moore to Sean Payton. And I hope everybody in the fan base understands that. I truly believe the organization finally understands that. And honestly, we in the media probably have a little ways to go when it comes to truly getting there, when it comes to the comparisons of any other coach to Sean Payton. What say you?
You know, I get it for the people making those comparisons, you know, whether you want to admit it or not. If you get a new girlfriend, there's a part in the back of your head that might compare certain parts of her to your ex, whether you're like, oh, wow, this new girl I have is so much better or whatever. I get the comparison. It's human nature. I understand it. Sean Payton, greatest Saints head coach of all time. You know, the records that he had when he was here, the team success, bringing the first Super Bowl to New Orleans, spectacular. Here he became one of the most premier head coaches in the NFL, and he is still living off that legacy. But the Saints didn't hire Kellen Moore to be the next Sean Payton. They hired Kellen Moore to be better than Sean Payton. They hired Sean Payton, and all the years that he was here, he won a championship. When Mickey Loomis and Gail Benson hired Kellen Moore, they did so with the idea that hopefully he can win multiple championships. And then I started looking back because I said, okay, so I know what Sean Payton did when he was here. What did Sean Payton do before he was here? Because, you know, there's all the talk about, you know, Sean Payton wasn't the Saints' first choice. So if you really want to look at Sean Payton's resume before he became the head coach of the New Orleans Saints and did all those incredible things I just mentioned, if you line that up to Kellen Moore's resume right now, Kellen Moore actually has a stronger resume than Sean Payton did. Right. If you really want to turn back the clock, Sean Payton was the offensive coordinator for the New York Giants. In the 3 years that he was offensive coordinator over there, they had scoring offenses of 15th in the league, 21st in the league, 22nd in the league. Never better than average offenses in New York. He goes to Dallas. He takes over as the quarterback coach. First year in Dallas, he has Quincy Carter. Quincy Carter throws for 17 touchdowns, 21 interceptions. Second year in Dallas, he has Vinny Testaverde, 17 touchdowns to 20 interceptions. Third year in Dallas, he gets an older Drew Bledsoe, 23 touchdowns to 17 interceptions. That's his resume before he came to the Saints in 2006. Now you look at Kellen Moore. If you want to look at him as the offensive coordinator of the Dallas Cowboys. First year he took over in 2019, they had the 6th ranked offense in the league. 2020, they dropped a little bit to 17, but they bounced back in 2021 with the #1 scoring offense in the NFL. Next year, 2022, he was 4th. He went to the Chargers. They were average over there. Went to Philadelphia, top 10 offense in a Super Bowl. When you can, and even if you want to, since I took Sean Payton when he was a quarterback coach, if you want to take the year that Kellen Moore was a quarterback coach in 2018, Dak Prescott had 22 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. So when you really line up the resumes of Moore versus Sean Payton before they became the head coach of the New Orleans Saints, if you want to do that comparison, Kellen Moore is far ahead of where Sean Payton was when he came here. Now, what Kellen Moore now that he is here, we'll see if he can take that to a level higher than Sean Payton had. But, I brought up the ex-girlfriends before. If you're a girl and you start dating a guy, or if you're a guy and you start dating a girl, the last thing you want to hear is what they ex did for them.
Exactly.
That's the last thing you want to hear. If I start dating a girl, I don't want to hear, oh, you are so much better than my ex, or my ex used to do this, my ex used to do that. Exactly. I ain't trying to hear that. I'm trying to be better than that brother. So, let's leave the Sean Payton stuff alone. Let's let Kellen Moore be the first Kellen Moore and not the second Sean Payton. And then if everything goes well, the first Kellen Moore will take the Saints to levels that even the first Sean Payton couldn't take them.
I think that's fair. I mean, and I think the comparison, in fact, I almost had. It's funny how our takes generally line up, and not just we don't overlap because mine is different than yours, but we kind of had the same thought. I initially had the ex-boyfriend, ex-girlfriend take in there. Like, no, what you're maybe allowed maybe like a couple weeks to say, that so and so was XY was bad, was terrible, was this, was that. But after a while of comparison, you're like, all right, dude, all right, girl, we in the now. Yeah. So. It's certainly it's a reasonable comparison to make. So yeah, I think hopefully this is kind of it, and I kind of think the fan base is there. They when they came around for the Denver game, the Denver Broncos came, and the fan base was still pretty mad at him. So I think the fan base is ready for a new era, and I think the franchise is certainly ready for a new era. I just hope.
Hey, we're so mad they booed poor Will Lutz.
Yeah, I just hope that it doesn't become, if there's success, another Sean Payton. No. This is someone that's got no ties to Sean Payton. This is someone that's got his own sort of very unique resume. This is someone that's got his own sort of way up to the top. I just think it's different, and hopefully everyone gets treated as such. So, look, it was brought up in the press conference, and look, that's rightfully so, because there are going to make, that's easy to make that connection. I just hope that's where it stops, because I am looking forward to, because, when you went from Peyton to Allen, even to Rizzi, you kind of knew the way everything worked. You knew how they were going to do things. Like, I am ready to see a completely different way of doing things. I am ready for a totally different, maybe practice time. I'm ready for a totally different time of a press conference. I'm ready for a totally different way of, heck, I don't know, the way they do meetings with the media or whatever the case. Maybe they do OTAs different. Maybe they do mini. I don't know. I am just ready for it to be completely flipped on its head and see something completely different. And I'm hoping Kellen Moore does that, because outside of they both coached on offense, and they didn't even coach the same type of offense. To me, there are no comparisons to be made between Sean Payton and Kellen Moore, unless Moore ends up winning a Super Bowl again. And to me, that would be the next time you could properly compare those two. So hopefully that closes the book. And I felt like that was a good chance to get it in today, because I kind of want to set that sort of precedent going forward, even on this pod. This is a totally new way of looking at things. We have been so laser focused on kind of the way it's been done that I think this is a hire, and this is a coach that's really going to just knock that down and build things up his own way. And I'm thoroughly excited for that. So speaking of that, they've got a little bit. I don't think he's hired any. I know he hasn't hired a coordinator yet, but he's made some moves on the coaching staff. We should probably catch all up on that, because we haven't really touched on that since the last time we spoke. What do we have? I know, was it Jim Haslett? His son is going to join
Chase
the organization as a tight ends coach, and I believe Keith Williams is going to stick around, the wide receivers coach. He was a very good receivers coach. So that's another one. And then there's a couple interviews. What interviews do we have?
Brandon Staley was interviewed for defensive coordinator. Doug Nussmeier, the father of LSU's Garrett Nussmeier, interviewed as offensive coordinator. Both guys who worked with Kellen Moore in the past. Doug Nussmeier just worked with him on the Super Bowl team with the Eagles. So that's really going to be the next step for Kellen Moore, is putting together his staff, because we talked about when they were waiting to hire Kellen Moore, there are people getting hired across the league, not just as head coaches, but also as OCs and DCs. And to make one last comparison to the previous era, one of the most important hires that Sean Payton made was Dennis Allen.
Yeah.
Dennis Allen, horrible head coach. We talked about that at length. But as a defensive coordinator, he took a defense that was historically bad and turned it into the strength of this team. Kellen Moore needs to look for a guy on defense, since Kellen Moore is an offensive mind. Kellen Moore needs to find his defensive guy that can do something like that. And right now, it seems like the number one option right there is Brandon Staley.
Yeah, and if you go with Brandon Staley, we could do a whole pod on this eventually. Staley's always been a 3-4 guy, so I'm very curious to see if that would be the way you go, because there's a lot. You talk about change. Hey, that brings a totally change in style of player, look of player, prototype of player, which would really impact the type of players that they draft, which they have been married to prototypes for a very, very long time. There's also a couple other guys. This was from Adam Schefter today. Jamal Singleton is the assistant head coach and running backs coach for the Eagles. Interviewed for the Saints offensive coordinator job. Whoever doesn't get promoted for the Eagles to take Kellen Moore's spot, I wonder if that person, if it's Nussmeier or if this Singleton, if that person makes it down here to be the offensive coordinator. You're not going to call plays here, but I still think it's a pretty good title. It's a pretty good job, especially if you also get the assistant head coaching title to go with that. Brandon Staley for defensive coordinator, who was, he actually wasn't bad as a head coach. He was 500. He was better as a head coach than obviously DA in his time as head coach. He went 24-24, got to the playoffs a couple times. So that's an interesting one. Durante Jones, who was here with LSU, he's another name that could be that has interviewed for the job or is going to interview the job according to multiple reports. There's another name. Let me look it up really quick, and it is Eagles DB coach Christian Parker. According to one report, this is from the Philadelphia Eagles blog, could be interviewing for the Saints defensive coordinator position. So he is the defensive passing game coordinator and DB's coach, Christian Parker, for the Eagles. So obviously he's got some work to do to get his guys in line. He's made a couple of hires so far, sounds like, and I'll be very curious to see how he assembles his first staff, because that is a very, very important part of the process. And frankly, it's a part of the process where if you're a first-time head coach, you're not exactly, you know what you generally want, but you're not exactly sure, because you've never really commanded a coaching staff room before, how you're going to mesh and personality. So it's a little bit of trial by fire. So I think it's a huge part of the process. It's going to get a lot of attention, but it probably won't get as much attention as some of the moves he'll make roster-wise. But the building blocks of this new look New Orleans Saints with Kellen Moore running the show is happening before our very eyes. I would expect him to probably spend this week. When is the Combine? Is that next week? When is the NFL Combine? Because that's coming up. That's the next big thing. And they already were at the Senior Bowl without their staff in place. So you do not want to get to the Combine without your staff and your front office, ready to go in place. When is that going to be this year? I'm looking it up right now. But it's usually in February at some point. I'm having trouble in right here. Maybe you'll have a little bit of better success. But nonetheless, it's coming up soon. It's the next big thing in the offseason. February 27th through March 2nd. That is straight through Mardi Gras.
Right.
They missed all. He's going to get no Mardi Gras this year. But you do want your entire staff, hopefully your entire staff assembled at that point or as close to it as possible. So you got about 10 days, hopefully get all their ducks in a row and get moving with the coaching staff, because that is going to be a huge part of the process. And from the Combine, boom, free agency starts. From free agency, they got the NFL owners meetings. From there, you got the draft. From the draft, you got OTAs and mini camp, and then before you know it, training camp will be here. And because it's a new head coach, you can start like a week or two early.
Yeah,
I believe when it comes to OTAs. So start your engine. It's going to be a fun ride for the next couple of months.
Yeah, of all the names we just mentioned, I gotta address the elephant in the room. One of the names, Doug Nussmeier.
Yeah.
Dad of Garrett Nussmeier, who's going to be a quarterback that's going to get a lot of eyes next year. Garrett Nussmeier right now is the leading odds maker for the Heisman Trophy.
Really?
Going into his second year at LSU. We've seen coaches, Deion Sanders, that want to coach their sons. Mm-hmm. If Doug Meyer were to get this job,
Doug Nussmeier?
Yeah, Doug Nussmeier were to get this job, and the Saints were looking for a quarterback next year as Garrett Nussmeier comes into the draft, I'll just let your imaginations roam a little bit there and see what some of the possibilities may be.
A lot of things have to happen before that could be a
Yeah,
response,
that's true.
but that could be a reality. But hey,
As soon as you hear the name Doug Nussmeier, you start thinking about it.
It could very well be a reality for the New Orleans Saints. So it is going to be an interesting stretch because we've already potted about the quarterback scenario. We know you've seen that because there's a lot of people have watched. A lot of people have left comments about that. A lot of comments about
some
that.
Some agree.
Others
say,
maybe some people are starting to come around to the idea of just maybe we finally broken through how much you actually have to do.
Nah, because there's still people in the comments saying, well, let's bite the bullet and cut them.
But I feel like there are more people that are honestly understanding what's going on here. So for those people, I understand, and kudos to you for that. But ultimately, it's going to be difficult. But it still could very much happen. So, and then obviously there's the draft coming up here shortly, and that'll be another telltale sign of what direction they could potentially go. We got a few more seconds here. Do we have anything else to talk about here on this Monday? What should be coming up next?
Up next, we've got the combine, and then
no, I know that, but I think probably the next thing you'll hear is another another staffer to get hired, and then hopefully that'll kind of become more of a. I don't think it's gonna be as long drawn out process as it was to find Kellen Moore. Usually, the assistant coaching staff have a pretty clear pool of candidates they want to talk to, get in, get out. Do you want, because these assistant coaches move around a lot, so it's not
sticking with people he's familiar with.
Exactly. So I would expect that to happen fairly quickly, and I'm just very curious to see what that ultimate coaching staff would end up like. All right, that's it for us. For Andre Johnson Jr., I am Sean Fazende. We'll catch you guys next time on Overtime.